In the age of AI, photographers are called to ask themselves why they pick up a camera in the first place. Today's guest reminds us of the simple truth in the cliché that it's all about the journey, not the destination. Welcome to Pixels, where we explore the heart and art of photography. I'm Beth Bilo, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm pleased to welcome Dusty Doddridge to the podcast. We talk about how he finds inspiration in places both foreign and familiar, the gifts of stretching your creative comfort zone, and why we are living in the best time to be a photographer. It's a really lively conversation that I am confident that you're going to enjoy. In the early 2000s, Dusty had a unique opportunity to explore the pristine wilderness of Arctic Sweden on a couple of extended backpacking trips. Things would never be the same as photography and creative expression became the primary driver for future outdoor adventures. Since then, Dusty has been able to explore places in the world that he could not imagine and never even knew existed. The main regions of his photographic explorations have been the surreal beauty of the Western U.S., the pristine wilderness of the Arctic, and diverse mountain scenery in his home state of Tennessee. He enjoys the excitement and adventure of exploring new places, but also the chance to develop a deeper relationship and portfolio of images by returning to landscapes over time. In 2010, he launched a photography business, which allows him the opportunity to share outdoor adventure and creative expression with others through workshops, writing and speaking, and making fine art prints. And you will find links to Dusty's website and socials, as well as other resources that we mention in the conversation in the show description. A special thank you to my video editor extraordinaire, Alex Armitage, and Nick Stover of Nature Photography Classes and his Inspired Creator Grant, which is a supporter of this channel. If you have a creative idea that you want to get off the ground or expand, you can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. And that link is also in the description. Please let us know in the comments what you find most useful or interesting or what resonates with you. Answer some of my questions that I have for Dusty for yourself. Let us know what you think. And of course, your shares and subscribe and notification button activity is all welcome. All the things that help this channel become more visible and reach more photographers and hopefully do some more good in the creative world. Please be sure to click that notifications button so you get notified of future episodes. Now, on to the conversation. So welcome, Dusty, to Pixels. I'm delighted to be chatting with you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to meet you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Always enjoy the podcast format where we can take some deeper dives into photography and art and adventures and misadventures.
Yes, adventures and misadventures, which we were talking a little bit about before we pressed record. So I think some of those are probably going to come out as we're chatting. And one of the reasons we're connected is I want to give a quick plug to the Outdoor Photo Alliance. They're hosting the Horizons Photography Conference in October in Durango, Colorado. And you and I will be sharing the stage, probably not at the same time, but both there as presenters. And so I'm really delighted to get to meet you in advance and looking forward to meeting you in Colorado in October.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. I think that's one of the cool things that I enjoy a lot about photography is just meeting people that you maybe have some connection with online. You've never met them in person, but maybe you're exchanging comments about one another's images or where to travel to, where to photograph, and just you have this online relationship, which is nice. But then there are opportunities like conferences or whatever where you can meet in person. And that for me is really cool. I really enjoy getting to meet folks in person that you might have known for years, perhaps online, and never had a chance to shake hands and have a more in-depth conversation like you can in person. So I'm really looking forward to that conference as well.
Yeah. I'll just speak quickly that I just came from the Women's Winter Photography Conference, also put on by Outdoor Photo Alliance. And exactly what you're saying, these women that I had interacted with for years online that you almost feel like you know.
Yeah.
And when you see each other in person, it's like, I know you. And it's so wonderful, whether it's, just to get to sit down and have a cup of coffee together, just even to give them a hug and say, I really appreciate you. I'm so glad we're here. And so, there's nothing like that in person. As much as the virtual is, serves a purpose.
Totally agree. It's wonderful to have all this technology where we can stay connected when we otherwise would not be able to connect. But yeah, I'm just kind of enjoying those in-person opportunities and really looking forward to the conference. In fact, I have been in touch with Theo Bosboom. I ordered his book online back in December, and not being involved in the conference at that point, I don't think anyway. But anyway, the book didn't arrive. They somehow got lost in the mail. And so I emailed him like, hey, the book never arrived. What do you want to do? And he's emailing me back. And then suddenly I find out I'm in this conference. And then I find out he's in the conference. It's like, well, why don't you just bring the book with you if it's not too much trouble, And he was,
it.
Yeah, right, exactly. And he was fine with that, and then another week or two goes by. And then I think like last week, the book shows up, And so we had a nice conversation about the book, and again, looking forward to meeting in person, at the conference in Colorado. So that's just one of those cool things about being in photography and connecting online, but then, being able to meet in person. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, cool. Well, maybe we've already gotten a hint of something, but what's giving you energy today? What's got your pep in your step?
Mostly coffee. Yep. Yeah. I think, I'm at this stage, I think in life and in my photographic journey where I really just have a lot of joy and appreciation for the friendships that have been formed over the last 25 years. And it's just wild to me that almost all of those friendships, spent a lot of time with some of these folks. And they've just happened randomly. I'm just out in the middle of some wilderness area. You meet someone, the next thing you know, you're sharing adventures together. My primary business partner, I just randomly met, and we've done, 40 or 50 photo tours together over the last 10 years. And it was all just these random meetings with people that's just almost defies explanation. I think there's just a lot of joy and a lot of just satisfaction around those long-term friendships that have been formed just almost inexplicably, if you will. So I really value those friendships quite a bit, and our shared adventures and our shared misadventures. So those kinds of things make me smile. And I'm really appreciative of those friendships very, very much.
Yeah, lovely. It's a reminder that the community of photography can be a very generous place and a place for connection. And I'd say, the unexpectedness of it, it's like there's also an of course about it, because you're out doing something you love and you're finding other people who love the same thing. So we're going to find each other. And that's such a gift.
It really is. And it's something I think, when I was sort of starting out doing outdoor adventures and photography, I didn't really anticipate it. I was just drawn to being back out in nature and, and just being excited about photography in general as a way to kind of express something of that experience. So your mind is kind of, focused on that direction, not really anticipating that you're going to meet some amazing people and form friendships and business partnerships with them. Just could not have anticipated any of that at all. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we learned from your bio that you're an explorer and you like both those far-flung locations. I mean, I'm sure those 40 or 50 photo tours you've done have been in lots of different places. And you also consider yourself kind of an explorer closer to home. What creative lessons have you learned from integrating the new and the familiar into your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think new places for me are a way to kind of leave my comfort zone. If I've never been there before, I mean, everything is new. Might be a new language, might be a new landscape. You're researching maps. It's a maybe unfamiliar terrain. So it's a series of a lot of different challenges when you're into a new place. And so I like having a challenge. I think there is an element of risk. Some of these places that you're going to, there's extreme weather, there's extreme terrain. And I think it gets you in this mindset of kind of leaning into discomfort and leaning into risk a little bit. And I think that's good for your creative self also. I think you grow creatively when you kind of ease out of your comfort zone and you are willing to take more risk. And that's usually where creative growth comes from. So I like the excitement of anticipating a new place and a new adventure that infuses some energy into what you're doing, and it's something to really look forward to. Whereas a place that you've been to maybe a lot, I think of those kind of places as places that you have a relationship with. You get to know them over time, and I think creatively and photographically, you've had an opportunity to maybe explore the obvious first. You've gotten met with Captain Obvious, and you've done those things first, and so now you can remove those, get those out of the way, and now you have a little more creative freedom to just explore, to dig deeper, to be there in different conditions, to see things, maybe the same spot, but from a different perspective. And so I think there's a way to kind of grow creatively too in places that you're very, very familiar with. And it certainly presents an opportunity if you're trying to develop a portfolio, or if you have some project in mind, that you can really kind of round out those different perspectives and different types of images by returning to a place over different seasons, over the course of many years. So I'm really fond of both. I'm really fond of the excitement and the energy and leaving the comfort zone and taking more risk with a completely unfamiliar place. And I love returning to those familiar places, like sitting down with a cup of coffee, with an old friend and just exploring. So I love both. I think they're both great ways to expand your creativity.
Yeah. What would you say is this might be an adventure or a misadventure, but when you talk about the risk and outside the comfort zone with those, the on location, what pops up as the riskiest or the most stretching for you?
Wow. That's a big question. I think, two maybe trips in the same area, but at really different times of year. I think an initial backpacking trip up to Arctic Sweden. This was now 20 years ago. And so this is a place that is known as the last wilderness of Western Europe. There's no trails. You're completely navigating through valleys. You're route finding on your own, and you're just out there. Now, so if you have satellite communication, great, which is always a safe choice in those kind of places. But otherwise, you're on your own, and everything that you need in life is on your back. Your food, your clothing, your shelter, and then there's water all around you. So it's easy to get water. But that's also probably the biggest risk and maybe the scariest things, because in order to make progress in that environment, you have to cross these sort of glacial rivers. And so the secret to surviving that is, of course, crossing at the right place and not crossing at the wrong place. So you can kind of walk up to the edge of some of these rivers and you can literally hear boulders rolling down the riverbed. Wow. And that's a little bit unnerving, but yeah, to be able to navigate that kind of environment on your own and cross those rivers successfully, that is, that's a pretty edgy kind of thing, at least for me in my experience prior to that. And I think there's a certain freedom that comes with that really hooks you. It's like, I don't need a cell phone. I don't need technology, really. Everything I need is on my back. I can carry 2 weeks worth of food on my back, and life is good. So it really reinforces, I think, the simplicity of life that we can aspire to have in the modern world, and that we really don't need as much as we think we do. And so there's a lot of lessons there, along with some of those sort of physical risks. And then the second one, I would say, same region, but a winter cross-country ski trip in the Arctic is that's a challenge, especially for someone like myself who'd never skied a single day in his life before. So I'm cross country skiing, thankfully not downhill skiing, but
Yeah.
cross country skiing with a buddy of mine on the border of Sweden and Norway. This was March of 2020. And the beautiful thing about that trip is, you're able to ski hut to hut. So if you can manage to get from one hut to the next, you're relatively safe from those winter storms that come in, but you still need to be prepared to
Mm-hmm.
survive a storm if a storm does hit between the huts. So you have to have tent, sleeping bag, snow shovel, all those kinds of things. And so the cool thing is we were able to stay in a hut on the Norway side, and the Sami, the indigenous reindeer herders, they drive snowmobiles in the winter and they supply the huts with firewood. So you can melt snow for water, which is important, and
Mm-hmm.
cook your food and then heat up the inside of the hut and stay warm while it's a raging winter storm. So for someone like myself who grew up in the South, relatively balmy, we may or may not get snow in a given year, to
Yeah.
kind of tackle Arctic winter backcountry, never having skied before, that was a little bit of a stretch. I fell a bunch in the beginning,
Yeah.
which was pretty comical, given that I learned that in cross country skiing, your boots are actually stuck in your skis. They don't pop out. So,
Right.
I'm falling down. I've got one ski going this way, another ski going that way. I've got one arm in a pole this way, one arm in a pole that way. I've got probably a 30-pound backpack on my back. And I'm scratching my head wondering, okay, now how do I get up from this? Meanwhile, my
Yep.
buddy's just looking at me, grinning, shaking his head like,
Streaming.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, this will make a great
This is a
video to
good
see how
reel.
you actually extract yourself out of this pile of snow. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think if you're doing those things in an informed way, you're prepared for the weather, you have the right clothes. And in my case, I'm going with a good buddy who's been in that environment during that season a couple of times, and you're mitigating the risks somewhat. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
those are the kind of trips that I really enjoy. It's causing me to stretch. It's causing me to do something I haven't done before. And I think that's I don't know, that's where the adventure is. I think that's where the growth comes from, and that's where great misadventure stories comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it strikes me that it's even as you're describing it, like there's an aliveness to the story and the way you're telling it, like you're almost back there and feeling all of that. And we sometimes don't realize, and this is going to sound sort of negative, I suppose, but we can get kind of numbed out in the everyday world of our phones, our screens, our commutes, everything. And what you're describing seems like it just totally takes you into a different place where you have to use different parts of your imagination even to navigate that environment.
Yeah, 100%. You have to focus on what's going on. You're trying to make
Mm-hmm.
critical decisions in the moment. So it really forces you to be in the moment and to think clearly. On our last day, we had a forecast that was for a big winter storm coming in, so we had to get from the hut on the Norway side to the Sweden side really quickly. It was only like 5K, so super short. But man,
Mm-hmm.
we got back, and literally within an hour after we got back, it's like a 60-mile-an-hour wind, and the snow is sideways. It's like plastering the whole hut. The hut, which has been there for like 100 years, is literally shaking. I'm just like, man, I'm so glad not to be out in that. But the
Yeah.
local people up there, I was like, oh, it's nothing. And they're out there. They've got a big pulk behind them. They're pulling like a 200-pound sled behind them. Like, no big deal. So a lot of it's just what you grow up with, what you get used to.
Yeah.
But it's, those folks have a lifetime of experience of knowing what to do and how to deal with all of that. And they're highly experienced.
Yeah.
But yeah, those experiences, you really, you come alive, you're in the moment because you kind of have to be, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. At the conference in Colorado, I'm laughing hearing your story, and I'm thinking about my misadventure of learning the phrase post-holing. That was new to me. Victoria Hawk said, "Oh, that's what happened to you," when I described getting stuck in the snow. And I had my 20-pound, backpack on, and nobody was around, and I was stuck. And I really had to pause and think, okay, how do I get myself out of this?
Exactly.
And so that's my version of but I'm curious, I didn't grow up doing these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me that, that's a stretch, just getting stuck on a little inland lake in Colorado. How has this kind of adventurous spirit always been with you, or how did this come about?
That's a good question. There, probably a couple of layers to the answer to that. When I was a kid growing up in Memphis, my family did a lot of sort of outdoor activity, fishing and boating and things like that. And my dad would take me and his friend, they would take me out in the winter on a boat in the Mississippi River. It's probably below freezing. It's so cold. There's ice freezing on the boat. And so we did a lot of outdoor adventure locally when I was a kid. And I'm very thankful for that. And then I got into sports later and kind of did a mix of sports and a little bit of outdoor adventure. But that, I think, was part of my upbringing that I think when I started working post-college, I really missed a lot. And so it was good to kind of reconnect that. And then I think there's probably something in my family tree that's just maybe genetic. My mother's grandmother was just a super fascinating person. She was like the first or second woman in the state of Tennessee to have a pilot's license.
Wow.
And she would do all sorts of like stunt flying. She flew under the Mississippi River Bridge. She did these long distance swims out in the Gulf of Mexico. And she was an entrepreneur and starting businesses. And she was way, way ahead of her time with the things that she was doing. And my mother's father was a little bit that way too. So there's something in our family tree that's got a little bit of an adventurous entrepreneurial spirits. I'm giving a nod to my great grandmother.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So many other questions are popping up, but I'm going to, as we talked about before, we could probably have hours long conversation about these various things, even as individual questions. But I'm curious about something you said in our prep for this conversation around photography, and that this is like the best time to be a photographer. And I found I was like a yes and to that, because I thought, yes, we're not having to backpack in, Arctic temperatures with glass plates and huge all this kind of stuff. We've got it much more technologically advanced, and that technology is part of the challenge that some people are saying this is a really, I don't know how many people are saying this, but it's a challenging time anyway to be a photographer. Can you talk more about what you feel optimistic about, what you're seeing and experiencing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there might be a 3-hour answer to that question. Okay. So I'm not offended if you have to cut me off or edit the answer, but here's some things that come to top of mind. Number one, the craft is no longer a barrier for people that want to get into photography. So when I was learning back in the old film days, that was hard. I mean, because let's say shooting Fuji Velvia, you've got 4.5 stops of dynamic range of light that you're working with. So if the light that you have going on around you is outside of those 4.5 stops, you can't make a photo. That's just how it goes. And you really had no idea if your photograph was in focus or not. You just didn't know. You hoped, but you didn't know. And even the depth of field preview button, like, okay, I'm at f16, I hit that button, it's completely black. Like, I don't know. I could stand here for a half an hour and maybe my eye adjusts to it, but then the light's gone. So I don't know. I'm glad, I'm thankful for those film days. But I wouldn't want to go back to those kinds of barriers to dealing with light and depth of field, especially.
Yeah.
And so that barrier is gone. I have a very good buddy, longtime buddy, who just switched from film to digital in 2020. Wow. And he's just like, wow, there's so many more creative possibilities you can do. I'm like, yeah, there is. And anyway, he's an extraordinary photographer. Wonderful, wonderful. And I think some of the better photographers we have today are some of those photographers who really spent a lot of time working in film, because you really had to get those compositions dialed in, and you had to be a really good craftsperson. You had to really dial in your craft very, very well, because it's $3 a shot at that point by the time you're buying the film and processing those kinds of things. Anyway, so the craft is no longer a barrier, and I think that's a really good thing. And second, to my own journey, I mean, I've got a number of books on my shelf behind me, but there's not one of them that's from the film days that taught you almost anything about photography. So there was just, I mean, you could go through a photography school if you wanted to go that route, or traditional academic path, perhaps. There was a few workshops that a handful of people did, but there was just almost a minimal learning opportunity back then. So if you think about it, you would want to learn how to do photography. You would want to learn how to process your images. You would perhaps want to learn how to print. Well, there was just an extraordinary vacuum, at least from my experience, of learning opportunities back in those days. Well, now, let's move to today. And it's like, whoa, I mean, you can go to some amazing photographers' websites and they've got all sorts of videos that you could download that show you how to photograph, that show you how to process your images. They've got PDFs that are very in-depth. Of course, there's YouTube,
Yep.
for better or for worse, but there's a
Right.
lot of good stuff that's on YouTube if you can get to the good stuff. And now, there's just workshops and conferences that just seem so fantastic and so readily available. The learning opportunities are just extraordinary in my mind.
Yeah.
And, I think printing technology, I'm looking at my printer now, I'm thinking, you can print a lab quality print with a click of a mouse in your home. And I just think that's pretty mind boggling. And some of the photo books behind me, I mean, the quality, the print quality alone in some of those books is just extraordinary. They're like fine prints, but they're mass produced in book form. And for me, that's also pretty mind blowing. And I think just the overall volume of extraordinary work that's being done compared to 15, 20 years ago, it's wild. And so for me, that's exciting. I love to be a part of this, even just a very teeny tiny part of it. And yes, there's some downside to technology, AI, and, I'm have minor concerns about how AI affects photography, but I have larger concerns, as do people a lot smarter than I am, about how it's going to affect our lives as a whole.
Yes. It's an existential threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even as it has a lot of wonderful applications that are definitely going to improve our quality of life, there's a dark side.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I failed to mention was about the business side of photography. And I think, there's pros and cons there. Let's take, when digital photography first started out, then that meant maybe the ending of stock photography as a business. There's still people doing it and still making money, and that's great. But then we have all these other new business possibilities that the technology is bringing. And so I think there's some pros and cons around the business side of photography. As certain business models fade away, then there's new ones that come along. I mean, who would have thought 15 to 20 years ago that you could build a successful business being a YouTube photographer and that sort of thing? It's like that couldn't have even conceived that was even a remote possibility. Yeah, pros and cons around the business, but no, I'm very thankful to be photographing in this season that we're in right now.
Yeah. Thank you for that wave of optimism. And because it is sometimes a little easy to focus on the things that could get derailed and go wrong, like AI, and that supplanting the actual photographer. I guess when you think about that, what's your attitude?
Yeah. I've thought about that a little bit. And I think, I think humans, we still have this hardwired need to be out in nature. I don't think that's going to change. And I think as we have more technology that surrounds us, I think we're only going to need to be back out in nature more, not less. And I think that we're still going to have a desire to share something about that experience with other people. And I think part of how we're going to still want to do that is through a photograph. And I think that's the beauty. Sometimes we get caught up in a lot of kind of esoteric discussions, but I think the beauty of a photograph is that it's a unique moment at a unique place that a human gets to experience and put a rectangle or square around it and then share that with the world. And that's the beauty of what a photograph is. And I don't think that's going to change, even though we have the capacity to create something on our machine that maybe duplicates that. I think as humans, we're still going to desire to pursue that experience and to say something creative about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's not ever going to go away, or at least I don't think I'm going to want to stop doing that. I still want to go out there and pursue experiences, especially a shared group experience or with another person, and then have an opportunity to put a square or rectangle around it, and then have some form of personal expression come through that may be some sort of inspiration for another person or a small group of people. And that to me is just, I think, what art is all about. It's a chance to express something that we wouldn't otherwise have a chance to express in a more traditional way, where words kind of fail us. Then we have photograph or other media that help us along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yay. Oh, good. That's what I needed to hear. I think, and I'm guessing that's going to resonate with a lot of folks that are asking themselves that same question and doing that same soul searching. And I would say, like, almost all the photographers I ever talked to about this, we talk about the experience of taking the photo as being as important, if not more important, than the end product. So it's like you said, the experience of getting out in nature. That's not going to go away. If anything, it will become more important to us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, if I have a choice of either going out in nature and never making a photograph, I'm going to choose going out in nature. Just, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of how I approach my trips. If I take a trip, I'm interested in the experience, and the photography kind of is secondary to that. And if I make some compelling photographs or a compelling photograph, great. If I don't, that's okay. I think you don't want to get too caught up in outcomes where it takes you away from the experience of the moment. And I think photography is a way to kind of dial you into that moment. But if you were too hung up on, was this going to be good or not, or is it going to turn out to be, that's going to kind of, I think, put a damper on how you experience that place in that moment. So I think it's you've got to kind of think about what's important to you and then move from there. And I don't know. I like getting out in nature and having fun and exploring. And if photos happen, great. If they don't, that's okay. Still had a wonderful adventure, or maybe even a misadventure or two.
So we're going to take a look at some of the pivot pixels that have represent, some sort of shift in your journey. And I'm curious to hear about this first image that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a pretty special place. That's the location of the very first hike I did in the Smoky Mountains. The very top of that cascade, the very, very top. This is from a different trip and different image, but this image kind of resonates with me a little bit more in a way. But I remember, this is back in the film days, and the very top of that cascade had some steam coming off of it early in the morning. And in the spring, the sun comes through the canopy there behind it, and it was like a sunbeam that lit the steam that was coming off the top of that cascade. And yet the rest of the forest, it's a heavy rhododendron forest right through there, was in kind of soft light. So you had this kind of really interesting detail, and yet kind of this dramatic light that was happening. And so again, back in the film days, made a photograph, had no idea if it was going to turn out or not. And then, send off the film to California lab or wherever it was, comes back 2 weeks later. You don't know if everything's completely black or whatever's going to happen. And it was a pretty good looking slide. So dropped it in the slide scanner, worked on it some in Photoshop, hit the print button on the old Epson printer. Can't remember what model it was. And I vividly remember seeing that print come off the printer, holding it in my hands. And I remember saying to myself, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Now, I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that there was something magical about that experience and the opportunity to try to express something about that experience in a tangible form, and kind of, being in charge of that process from start to finish. There's something about a closure from start to finish, I guess, in my personality that's also appealing. But I can vividly remember holding that print in my hands saying, okay, this is what I want to do. So that image there is not the one from the piece of film, which is probably not that great, but kind of beside the point. But that image there sort of reminds me of that moment, kind of that origin story of really wanting to dig deeper into photography, even not knowing what that meant at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think gave you since you didn't know what that meant, what kept you going to maybe discover what that meant? Or have you figured out what that means at
Yeah,
this point?
I think it was just the excitement of that whole experience from start to finish. I think,
Yeah.
you know, uh, it's exciting. It's rewarding. When you're able to do something like that, and I think you just want to explore more.
Hmm.
And I think at the time, I had a buddy who was getting back into photography. He kind of knew what he was doing already, and so it worked out really well that we were able to hike there in particular and some other places together. And I was kind of learning very new and he was getting back into it. And so there was another person who kind of was there alongside of me, especially during that early part of my photographic journey. And that was very helpful and a lot of fun too.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I just think there's certain pivotal moments, conversations, or experiences that sort of point our compass in a new direction. And
Yeah.
that hike in that particular image definitely pointed my compass in the direction of photography 100%.
It's like your firstborn.
Yeah, yeah.
When you were describing it coming out of the printer, I'm like, it's like a child is being born.
The child is born.
And you
Exactly.
hold it and you're like, I'm in love.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that black and white image, changing gears a little bit, but
Yeah.
that's a spot. It's kind of funny. Going back to the earlier part of our conversation, the only way that you can make that particular image is that you have to crawl out onto a boulder that's
Mm.
hanging over the stream. You can otherwise photograph it from the right side, or you can actually get into the stream and photograph it directly upstream, both of which are fine compositions to make. But that particular one, you have to crawl out on a boulder. Not anything extreme or anything like that, but it just
Mhm.
goes to show you that you can go to a place half a dozen times and kind of work on a composition or two. And then finally the light bulb goes on like,
Mhm.
yeah, if I just crawl out on that boulder, it's going to make this nice shape. It's going to focus the eye on that one small boulder with the water's kind of cascading over it.
Mhm.
And I think, again, going back to a place a few times, you tend to figure out what might be a stronger composition than the ones you might have explored earlier.
Yeah. Do you find that it also frees you up to experiment more because you've been there before, you know you're going to come again, so you play more?
Absolutely. I think you've got sort of the more obvious things done, the ones that you see first, and then you can explore and experiment and have fun on those return visits. So this is a
Yeah.
particular place I love going back to every year. I take my tour groups there, and you can make 1,000 photos in 50 yards on that stream. It's a pretty
Yeah.
cool place. So I love it. I never tire of going back there.
Yeah. So one more question before we go to the
Yeah.
next pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a processing question. This
Okay.
is in black and white. And did you shoot it in black and white or was it color film?
Oh no, yeah. This was it's probably early in the digital days.
Okay, so this is early
Yeah,
digital.
early in the digital days. When I
Okay.
was there much earlier shooting film, that was a color slide film, Fuji Velvety. But
Got it.
this was definitely digital. I don't remember the year of this one, but definitely, yeah. And I don't. Another kind of odd thing about how my brain works or doesn't work is I'm unable to physically visualize anything. So
Mm.
it's a particular brain disorder that's called aphantasia.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so I can't see the world in black and white, but I can't picture it in color either. If I close my eyes, it's just blank. Now, my
Interesting.
wife would probably have more to say about that, but I can't visualize a single thing. When I dream, my dreams are not visual at all. It's very
Hmm.
strange. And maybe that's part of some weird reason why I like photography, because I can see it. It's in front of me. I can see it. It's just that if I close my eyes, there's absolutely nothing there. So, if somebody's telling me to pre-visualize something, well, yep,
Not going to
I
happen.
can't do that.
Yeah, I've heard about this, and it,
Yep.
like, if I were to say, close your eyes and imagine a chair suspended in the air in the middle of the room, that
Can't
that
see
could
it.
not happen. Can't
Couldn't
see it.
happen. Yeah, and I can't draw either, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I can draw a stick
I,
figure, but
mhm.
if you can imagine, if you can't see anything in your mind's eye, well, how are you going to draw it? I mean, I don't know how other people
Yeah.
draw or not, but
Have you
yeah.
tried drawing with a reference photo? Does that work?
Oh no, couldn't do it. There's just
Can't
nothing
do it.
happening between
I
here and,
see.
and there. It just,
I see.
yeah, nothing there.
Yeah. So the camera is really like the perfect instrument for you
It
for
would seem.
expression.
Yeah, it would seem so. Yeah, I can't sing, can't dance, can't draw. It was probably my last hope to doing anything creative.
It was meant to be then. Yeah. So tell us about this snowy scene.
Yeah, so this was on the Arctic cross country ski trip, and just really fond of that trip in particular, and the ability to kind of stay in this remote mountain hut. You're, I don't know, 3 or 4 days away from civilization of any type. And we would just get up in the morning, and if the weather was great, we would put on the skis and ski towards a different valley. And that time of year, that far north, the light is very low angled and
Mhm.
interesting, and you just don't see that kind of light in other places at other times of year. And I don't know, that trip for me was just really special. Not amazing photographs, at least for me, but they're very special and very rewarding nonetheless. And they serve as a reminder for me to, again, try new things, take
Mhm.
risks. And, the really interesting things in life usually involve some amount of getting out of your comfort zone and taking some amount of risk. And I'd love to go back and do it again. I'd love to spend more time doing some winter cross country skiing. It was just that much fun and just had a blast. And so, again, maybe not the world's best photographs came out of that trip, but that really
Mhm.
wasn't so important to me. It just it's a very helpful reminder to leave that comfort zone behind, take some risks, and be open be open to whatever happens, adventures and misadventures.
Yeah. What do you feel like is so I often think of like our comfort zone expanding as we do more things and it becomes a little bit, at least a little bit more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
What feels like it's still outside your comfort zone that you have yet to do that you want to do?
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I think I could do more black and white work. I've done some of that, but not a ton. I know we have another image. Maybe we'll get to talk
Hmm.
about it a little bit. I haven't done a lot of very, I don't know, sort of minimalist kind of work before. I could see myself enjoying that. I think I have a hard time with that though, because then that starts to limit where I go. Like if I wanted to do a
Hmm.
lot of minimalist work, well, then I would photograph winter. I would photograph water. I would spend just most of my time in the desert or something with sand dunes. So yeah, those areas I enjoy, I could probably do more of, but then I still want to go to other places where minimalism doesn't work very well.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what's around the corner that is uncomfortable. I think, maybe doing some project work on photo books or something. I think what makes me uncomfortable about that is just the amount of time
Yeah.
invested on those projects, not to mention the amount of money that it
Hmm.
takes. And so I think creatively, that would be a lot of fun. But time wise and financial, ooh, that sort of, yeah, that would definitely make me a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, a few hurdles.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, yeah, cool. Well, you were talking about black and white and
yeah,
minimal, and I'm
yeah,
looking at this image, and this is both. And it's obviously dunes. So, can you tell us about this?
yeah, yeah. I think people might be surprised that that image is not that heavily processed.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a sunrise at Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado with my longtime business partner and photo buddy. No, I don't remember how high we were up that day, but I mean those dunes are about 800 to 900 feet tall, as I
Yeah.
recall, and you're at about 8,000 feet of elevation. It's not an easy journey to get up to certain points, in those dunes. And we were hiking in the dark, and when the sun kind of crests the mountain range there, you get this real dramatic spotlight, that you see there, and it doesn't last very long. And it was really cool. I think, and I look at that image, I see a lot of metaphors. I see, near and far, large and small, light and dark, light piercing the darkness. I see infinity. I see the fleetingness of life. I see a lot of things in that image, even though it is a very sort of minimalist image. But I think it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like the old Rorschach, ink blot. You can bring a
Yeah.
lot of your own thoughts and emotions and feelings into an image that is very minimalistic. And it just reminds me, I think, going back to our previous slide, that I think you can explore new styles and have a lot of joy and reward in that, but it doesn't mean that that has to become your style. I think for some
Mm.
people, they've explored a particular style. They've done it forever. They're tired of it. They're ready just to make a clean break and move on a completely different creative direction
Yeah.
for maybe a whole host of reasons. But for me, I think it would be hard to leave color completely, and it would be hard to not go back to environments that wouldn't necessarily lend themselves to this kind of photograph. And I think it's okay to explore, different and new styles without feeling any kind of pressure that, well, I must pursue this as my new creative direction. So I felt a certain freedom to say, yeah, that was a wonderful experience. That's the main thing. This was a cool black and white minimalist photo. I love that kind of work. My favorite photographers are usually black and white minimal, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm somewhat free to maybe not pursue that as my primary next direction, if you will. And that image reminds me of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's such a good reminder that just because we go down a certain path doesn't mean that it's the path, capital T, capital P, that we have a lot of agency and choice about what we're doing. And it might just inform, but not define the direction we go.
100%. We had a really cool opportunity to meet Clyde Butcher at his gallery down in Florida, and he had this very famous break with his colored work, and his son had passed away and all of this tragedy. And, it sent him on a new direction totally. And, he's got some just extraordinary black and white work. The large prints are just incredible, 4 feet by 5 feet. And he has this cool story about why they're printed large and all these giant cameras that he's used over the years. And yeah, it's really cool to be able to meet people who have done some really unusual and creative work. And they made a real interesting turn in their creative direction like Clyde has. So it was
Yeah.
really cool to meet him just briefly and have a short chat with him. It was a very, very rewarding conversation with Clyde.
Yeah, lovely. Nice. Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm curious if the next one is a pivot or if this is one that's an example of your work that has a story.
Yeah, probably not so much of a pivot, although maybe there was a little light bulb moment for me. This is in Colorado. outside of Crested Butte. And this is a little small grove of aspen trees. And it's near some other places that are well known. This is not so well known, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what finally it took me a while to figure out why I like this place so much, but it's a place that sits below a mountain ridge, pretty close by. And so what happens is that the sun is up above the horizon, but it's not above the mountain ridge just yet. So there is light that is coming over the top of the ridge, but it's indirect light. Mm-hmm. And so when it gets into the aspen grove, it bounces around. And so there is this soft, glowing light that's lighting up the fall color, but also the trunks of the trees. You know, you can see in that image that there's light on both sides of some of those trunks. And so the light is bouncing around in there, and it is literally glowing in that aspen grove. And it took me a couple of trips before my own light bulb finally went on to say, oh yeah, I like this place so much because there's just really, it's beautiful, as aspen groves are by their very nature. But in this particular moment of the morning, there is a literal glowing light that's in there. And I just love that type of light with that particular subject. And I think Christopher Burkett has some wonderful aspen grove photos, and he talks about the light in there in a much more eloquent way than I could. Yeah, I love that sort of reflected glowing light that's in that grove so much. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's like lit from within, and it's almost like there's a light underneath, and like there's it's really beautiful. I think the next photo that you shared with me, whoops, I'm on the wrong tab, is also an aspen grove.
Yeah, and that's actually I don't know, maybe about 100 yards or less from the other photo. But it's a rare circumstance. In Colorado, the air is very dry, of course, and a longtime friend there that I've known for, I don't know, about 20 years. He has a gallery there, and he's out photographing a lot. And he could probably tell you that in 20 plus years, he's only been able to photograph fog in the aspen groves just a handful of times. So I was just looking forward to hopefully one day getting to see and photograph fog in an aspen grove that was full of fall color at the time. And this was a couple of years ago. And, you know, we saw what we thought was going to be some fog from a distance. And so we came to this particular location, and remarkably, there was fog there for, I don't know, it didn't seem very long, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So, you know, I think I've been photographing there since 2000, and I think I've seen and photographed fog there twice.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those very, very special occasions. And I think it just reminds me that, you know, persistence, you know, is a big part of what we do. And as we mentioned earlier, going back to some of those favorite locations over and over and over again, you get to know them really well. You get the big stuff out of the way. But then on rare occasions, sometimes you're treated to something that's very unique and remarkable. And fog in an aspen grove, at least for me, was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's magical. It's so cool. It just gives it this soft, muted, sort of fantasy kind of feeling. So, but it's so bright with the yellow leaves.
Yeah.
And you know, like that, you're naming another advantage, of course, to going back to those familiar places, because you, like you said, that fog lasted 10 or 15. Because you were familiar with this terrain, this location, you were able to leverage that, you know, take advantage of that by knowing where you wanted to be. And even if you weren't pre-visualizing it, you had that familiarity to put yourself in the right spot at the right time.
Yes.
to
Yeah,
capture
makes
it.
a big difference. Yeah,
Yeah.
getting to know a place really well, you're able to create opportunities and take advantage of unusual conditions, and that was pretty rare. So very
Yeah.
thankful to be in that
Yeah.
spot at that time.
Yeah, for sure. I want to first reflect though before I move to another question as
Sure.
we start to close. Just a reflection that like as you were talking about that minimalist image,
Mhm.
the dunes with the light, describing all of the things you see in it, while you might not pre-visualize, you have this wonderful ability to be looking at something and explore all of the different visual permutations that it could have. I was just struck by how descriptive you were in talking about that photo.
Mhm.
And that's something that some people find challenging. So there's flip sides too.
Sure. It's a gift to have a brain that's mostly empty. Yeah,
It leaves lots of room for
that's right.
yeah, no, but I just appreciated the way you were talking about that minimalist image because those can sometimes be challenging to like pull out like what is it about this that has meaning.
Yeah. I think it is hard, and I think for me, it's much easier to talk about something than it is to write about it.
Mm.
Writing depends upon maybe the audience and the platform, but I just find that man, that's hard. I just don't know that I have the attention to detail and the patience. I can write okay, but man, writing is hard. But I do think that it's important to think about your images carefully, and if you
Yeah.
can express even a little bit of something in writing, even for your own benefit,
Yeah.
and certainly if you have some type of audience that you like to share it with, just to kind of let them know, about the inspiration or the motivation or those kinds of things, I think it can make a big difference in how images can be received by other people. So hard for me to do things in writing. I'd much rather just speak about them in kind of a free form way.
Yeah.
But yeah, the writing projects I think for me are tedious and challenging.
Yeah. Well, the more you do these kinds of conversations, the more transcripts you have that then write themselves.
I'm not sure I want to see the transcripts sometimes and see how much I just kind of wandered around.
They're revealing, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as we close, I'm curious about advice. And the question I ask is like, what's the best or the worst advice you've been given or you have given? Wondering what comes up for you when it comes to advice.
Well, yeah, I think some of the best advice that I received goes back to my earlier career in higher ed, when I was kind of forced back into the office against my will. And
Mm-hmm.
my colleague that I worked next door to for a number of years, she was great, and she just, we were having conversations, about daily life as normal colleagues do, and she just said, you just need to get back outside.
Mm.
And I mean, she
Yeah.
added, well, hey, there's the state natural areas that are close by, and there's some state parks that she really enjoyed, and then she said, hey, whatever happens after that is whatever happens after that. But quite obviously, you've been outside for the bulk of your life up to this point. Now you're not. And you're probably not going to be very happy for very long unless you get back outside.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was, of course, spot on, Captain Obvious
Yep.
stuff that I should have known already myself. But I think it just took a conversation to
Yeah.
sort of get it out of my system, and for her to process that and then say, well, okay, yeah, you need to get back outside. So I think
Yeah.
that particular conversation and that particular advice was really good for me. It's what I needed to hear in that moment, which is the nature of good advice, right? What someone needs to
Yeah.
hear.
Yes.
And so I'm very thankful for that advice, and I'm very thankful for the friendship that we had working together for a long number of years. In terms of advice, I had a email conversation with one of our clients, and I wrote about sort of how deliberate practice could be applied to photography. He's wanting to, just dig in and really give it a 100% and grow and continue this journey in photography. And then what does that look like? And so I just wrote this. I was probably up late one night, and thoughts are free flowing or whatever. And I wrote this probably email. It was way too long. And anyway, then that kind of translated into a blog post that I put out on my website that no one would ever read, which is probably for the best. But I think this notion of deliberate practice, when you're trying to do something that's complicated and challenging, whether it's technical or creative, or like music that's both technical and creatively complex, that probably takes a long time. It's not something you're going to pick up in a day or two. And that, oh yeah, I've got music. It's day 2. I've got music figured out. The same thing for photography. You're on a long journey to kind of learn the technical side pretty quickly now, but then this artistic part of the journey is not easy. And so what does that look like? And so I think applying this notion of deliberate practice, which this well-known psychologist wrote about, K. Anders Ericsson, in his book called Peak, I think is a good way to think about growing as an artist in an intentional way. There are a lot of people that become wonderful at what they do through a real sort of trial and error and intuitive way. And that can work for some people. But I think most normal humans, we need to have some sort of intentionality around getting better at something in order to make that happen. And that's kind of the essence of when I think about deliberate practice.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, and I was going to ask you about some resources that you find yourself recommending a lot. And I think Peak is probably one of them based on what you were just saying. And we'll include links to that in the show description. Anything else that you find yourself referencing and referring to a lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on my website, not a shameless plug. If no other humans come to my website, that's okay with me.
You can plug.
On my website, I have a web page for resources. So on that page, there's probably about 75 to 100 photography books. There's podcasts, of which I'm now going to add yours to.
Yay!
And films on photography, PDFs. So that's a really good, and they're all linked. So they're all linked there. If there are any that are broken, I apologize. Email me. I'll try to fix them. But that's a really good one-stop page. If you're looking for inspiration, magazines, podcasts, films, photography books. And the one thing that I'm into with several of my photo friends is photography books. So we're small collectors of photography books. But I think for me, that's a big inspiration to see what I think is probably the best form of the work at the moment. Because there's so much time, there's so much money that's involved, there's so many different people that get involved in a photo book project. It tends to elevate the work, in my view, probably to the highest level that we see at the moment. And so if I'm looking for inspiration, I'm pulling a book off the shelf behind me and seeing some amazing work done by some amazing people. And I find that to be very inspirational. So if I could recommend one thing, is to think about photography books as a source of inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're reminding me is it's inspiration, not just in the image itself, but in the act of creating that book. Like, there's a vulnerability and there's a stretching of that comfort zone, which we keep kind of coming back to. Like you said, that's kind of part of your stretch. Is it's bringing a lot more people into your process and putting it out there in a very unique way.
Yeah. And oftentimes you're talking about 20 and 30 years worth of work. If it's some type of, compilation over the course of someone's career, these are bodies of work that have a lot of depth and breadth to them. And, That's pretty remarkable stuff. So I don't know. There's a podcast dedicated just to photography books. So that's.
Oh, wow. Yes. Okay. That's intense.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's super instructive to listen to people, how those bodies of work came about, how they approach them, and those kinds of things. So yeah, very niche, but I think also very inspirational and very instructive at the same time.
Yeah. Because even if you're not planning on doing a book or having it all printed and whatnot, your point about a body of work, it's a different way of approaching your photography, one that I've been trying to stretch into. Instead of seeing individual images, I've shifted to seeing triptychs and diptychs and maybe small series. And next is, how does it all become a body of work? And photo books are a beautiful way to get some instruction on that. Thank you for offering that. So where do you like to hang out that people can find you and follow you and learn from you?
Well, they can find me on my website. It's dustydoddridge.com. As far as I know, I'm the only Dusty Doddridge now. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know.
At least you got the URL just in case.
Exactly. Just in case there's another one. So I have my work there. Tours are there. There's some downloadable free resources. I have some ebooks on forest and trees. They're free downloads. So people can reach out to me through there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. People can, message me there just by my name. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure those links are in the description, so it makes it even easier for folks to find you. So Dusty, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for the conversation. Can't wait to meet you in October.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I'm excited to meet you in person as well out in Colorado. So I'm looking forward to that very much. But thank you so much for having me, and just enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Dusty. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by nature photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.